Hello, everybody. I hope all of you are doing well. I'm hoping you're enjoying the course. We're getting toward the end of it at this point. Today, I'm going to talk about healthcare policy. Now, the issue that I'm talking about in healthcare policy, I was a health economist for quite a while, and I'm very familiar with health economics over the last 50 years. This isn't based upon some strange, mysterious concept. This is based upon today's lecture upon our understanding of capitalism. Now, do understand also that economists didn't study markets very much in the past. Like public healthcare economists probably did more than most, but most of them did not. And therefore, had a very difficult time sometimes explaining what was wrong with our healthcare policy. We knew something was wrong. We were doing 3 to 4 times as many hysterectomies as was medically indicated. We knew something was wrong, and I also knew something was wrong when my wife takes my son, who's never had a cavity, and the dentist all of a sudden finds 14 of them and fills 3 of them before he even leaves the office. And we take him to another dentist, and they find out he didn't have any more than those that were already filled. We know there's something wrong because we spend 19% of our GDP on healthcare, where most countries only spend 11.5%. But we live less time. We don't cover everybody. And our life, it just generally, our healthcare system has enormous amounts of malpractice and other problems. Number one cause of bankruptcy are medical expenses. That's not the case in other countries. You can be a tourist in Germany and get medical care without bankrupting your entire life. What is the problem with healthcare? The problem with healthcare is because it doesn't meet what we call market conditions. What are market conditions? Well, if you read the article, do markets work as advertised? I wrote it, and I most certainly recommended you read it earlier. You'll recognize there are 14 conditions for a market. Now, of those 14, 7 of them don't apply in this particular case. The conditions are met. But if you don't meet these conditions for a market, you have problems. The market won't operate properly. What are these ones that we don't meet in healthcare? And let me go through and kind of explain what kind of problems this causes within the healthcare system. First, rational decision-making. I'm not one of these people that argue, and though evidence does suggest, empirical evidence from research, that we're not very rational. But I would argue that we are rational enough to make better decisions about what clothes we're going to wear, what car we're going to drive, what we're going to eat today, than some government committee in Washington or some private advisor even, although some of us may benefit from that. But when I'm in the Lodi Hospital at 12:30 at night, and my wife has had a stroke, and they say, well, you need to send her to Stockton to St. Joe's there because our CAT scan is broken. Are you willing to pay for the ambulance there and back? I have neither the information nor the ability to rationally think. I mean, after all, it's my wife, she's in the hospital, very, very sick, to make an independent decision. It just isn't possible. And all of us face this. Even if you go to the doctor for a minor thing, we all face it. We don't understand the consequences. A second is the independence, a second condition is the independence of buyers and sellers. Now, if you go into the grocery store and you go like I do constantly, I often go to grocery outlet. I mean, it's less expensive. I find what I want, right? I'm making a rational decision and all, and grocery outlet is a completely independent outfit. What I decide to buy is what I decide to buy. What they decide to sell is what they decide to sell. And if we have a matchup, then I make the decision to buy it and everybody's happy. Not so in a doctor's office, let me tell you. You go in, the doctor says, hey, you need to have such and such done. I'll meet you at the hospital in a couple hours, or I will schedule a surgery for you. And of course, the moment they do that, they're scheduling more work for themselves and more money for themselves, which is why we had so many hysterectomies in the 1970s. They aren't necessarily doing it for your benefit. They're doing it because when they order it, they make money. It's not really your decision. They are independent. So we can't talk about a normal situation here. You also have to have reliable information and transmission of goods and services. Most of the time, that works pretty well, buying cars or burgers or something like this. Have you ever tried to find out how many malpractices your doctor has had? Whether that person's even competent? Oh, I'm held accountable. I ask some pretty hard questions and I do some stuff, but I still have a hard time really finding out lots of stuff. I can tell you personally, now it wasn't necessarily in charge, nor were other people, but both my mother and my mother-in-law died from malpractice. We didn't know that in advance. Most certainly they didn't know that in advance, but they were incompetent. They also had a conflict of interest in the case of both of them. In both cases, the providers made money if they operated on them, and they didn't make money if they sent them to competent medical care. So, hey, we're going back to that previous condition too. Let's go to another one. General accepted rules in the business. Oh, generally that's the case. But I want to tell you that it's not necessarily easily marshaled. Malpractice is not easily dealt with. If you do an unnecessary hysterectomy, for example, or unnecessary filling of a dental cavity, is that acceptance of the rules? We accept the fact that if you go and you buy a pound of hamburger, you get a pound of hamburger. Is that the case when you go to a dentist? And the dentist is willing to push the rules a little bit? Because after all, there's too many dentists in town. It's hard to make a good living. When I was a healthcare administrator, we had to go up and tell a provider up in, I was a doctor up in Yuba City ever so often, if you don't cut out the bad billings and the over services, we're going to cut you off the program. The only reason we didn't automatically is because we didn't have a lot of providers. But we'd have to periodically go up. Often we'd found he'd recently had a divorce or something, needed extra money. And when you consider the fact that over 90% of the people that go to medical school go there because they think they can make money, yeah, you understand some of the consideration there, potential conflict of interest. Marginal cost. All markets are based upon the marginal cost that you receive versus the marginal benefit. And if you don't have insurance, you don't necessarily do anything because you can't afford it. Average cost of the hospital right now is $4,000 a day. I think that's correct. Yeah, about $4,000 a day. If you don't have insurance, which then covers it, which means you don't pay the marginal cost, government will have to pay it. Or if you just can't pay it, the hospital will have to write it off as a loss. There's no comparison between one and the other. You're not logical when you're hurting. All you just want somebody to do is deal with something. You understand marginal costs. You don't understand marginal benefits. You're hurting, or even worse, your kid's hurting, or your wife's hurting, or your husband's hurting. So there's no comparison. Somebody else is picking it up. And then there's freedom of choice enterprise. Well, this one also gets into conflict of interest and things like this. People say, oh yeah, I pick my own doctor. No. Think about it this way. Think about buying a used car. You decide to buy a used car, but the market doesn't look like what you used to. To buy a used car, what you got to do is you got to go down to this office. And you walk into this office, and it's obviously fancy. And you sit down on the backside of a desk, and somebody who's obviously your social superior is on the other side of the desk in the front, just at their desk. And they got nice degrees and things like that. Of course, they got certificates and all kinds of stuff like that. And they start asking you all kinds of questions about your lifestyle and things like this. And you tell them all, and you answer every question as best you can. And then he gets out, the auto dealer says, this is the car you need. This is how much it's going to cost you. Well, I don't want that car. Well, that's the car that I'm prescribing. You can get a second opinion. Oh, by the way, it's $500 for the visit. Now, you can go to another car dealer who'll do the same damn thing and charge you $500, right? And they'll give you a prescription that may be different. You might get a second opinion. And by the way, if the car fails, that's not their responsibility. After all, they did the best they could, right? It's just, sometimes it's unpredictable. And yet we think that this is a rational system. No, of course you don't think it's a rational system for car dealers. But it is the way that we deal with it in medical services. By the way, that same example tells you pretty much that there's not any competition, though seventh of the conditions for a market. Oh, technically, if you're wealthy, there's competition. If you really have Cadillac health insurance, there's competition. But you're still dealing with people that you see as social superiors because the role of doctor versus patient makes it difficult. It's hard to assess. Some of us do it pretty well. I know how to work the system very well, having worked in healthcare for many, many years. My mother and my mother-in-law did not. As a result, they had poor results. So I want you to seriously think about this. American healthcare is not rated well. It's rated 37th in the world. It's rated well in terms of revenue generation. It's the most expensive at 19% of our GDP. Of course, most are only about 11 to 12. That's $1.5 billion a year that we're spending extra to get a really, really crappy system. Might want to consider what you prefer. I most certainly have. I wish you the very best. Hope this was helpful. Hope it give you something to think about. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.